Chapter 57. $100 ago. The trip back down Mount Lanayru was a nearly silent affair. Link didn't know what he could even say anymore, and Zelda didn't seem to be interested in speaking either. For some reason she wore her prayer dress still. At least she wore her heavy Rito cloak over it, with her hood pulled up to shield her face, and she had her boots on as well. He was even certain that he could see the outline of pants on under it. He initially thought that she might have wanted to try praying again in the morning, but she made no effort to do so. So he packed up their tent, he dismantled their fire, he scattered the ashes, and together they walked down the stone path. He'd tried to say something, and there were several times that he thought she'd tried to do the same, yet no words passed between them until they neared the bottom of the mountain. Only a small rise in the land blocked them from where he knew their companions would be waiting. Zelda stopped walking, and he did the same, looking back at her. She wrung her hands tightly, biting her lip. "Link, there's something that I must tell you." He didn't answer, but simply stood still, waiting. She glanced at him and then looked back down, taking a deep breath. She forced her hands apart. "When we get back to the castle, I'm going to tell my father that I will no longer be traveling to inspect any of the divine beasts. Without those, and now that I have visited each of the springs, I will no longer have a need to travel at all. As such, I feel it is necessary that he resign you to something more befitting someone of your stature and accomplishments. I do not know if he will listen to me, as he never did so in the past, but I believe that I can better explain my reasons now in a way that I could not before." Link stood numb. Had he been so wrong? Had he ruined everything that much with his idiotic confession the night before? "It isn't..." She glanced up towards him and he saw pain in her expression. "It isn't that I don't wish you around, I do. But if I'm to spend all my time in the castle, then you would be wasted. You should be training, preparing, doing, not standing outside my door and staring down an empty hallway." He felt as though a pit had opened up beneath his feet that threatened to swallow him whole. "I, in turn, will rededicate myself to unlocking my sealing powers. I will spend each day in prayer, all day if I must." Ruined. He'd ruined everything. He'd ruined her. He'd ruined himself. He'd ruined any chances that they had at happiness together. Why? Why couldn't he have just left it alone? Just stayed silent, like he'd so often been taught to do? Link, will you answer me?" He looked at her, then his face went blank. "I will do whatever you wish of me, Princess." She looked as though she had been slapped. Something dark and primal within Link relished it, for the hurt that he felt. But then he rejected that feeling. This was not her fault, but his. He had brought them to this inevitable conclusion. He closed his eyes, sighing softly. I'm sorry, it's just, I feel as though there are certain boundaries that need to be re-established after what happened last night." He still could remember the feel of her lips on his, her body trembling pressing against him. Had he misjudged? Had it all been an illusion of his own desires? Had he imagined her feelings for him? "This has nothing to do with last night," she said, stepping forward. "What you did, what you said, it was wrong. I took advantage of you, in your moment of vulnerability. It was selfish of me. I see that now. It will not happen again." No, you didn't. That's not how Princess Zelda." He met her eyes. "I am a knight. Perhaps one day I will be something more, but for now, I am a knight. And you, a princess. The things that I said were inappropriate. You are so much more than just a knight, Link. So much more than that to me. She stepped forward and almost seemed ready to reach out to him, but she stopped herself. That is why I must do this. I have to unlock my sealing powers before it's too late. He didn't understand. Not truly, but he didn't wish to argue. It wasn't appropriate for a knight to argue with his princess, so he remained silent and still, until finally, she looked down and continued down the path. He fell into step behind her. Together, they crested the small rise in the land, and came into view of the camp they shared with the champions. He saw Daruk first, stretching his arms high above his head. Then there was Mipha, who spoke quietly to Urbosa, and Revali, who had apparently decided to practice his archery by shooting thin tree branches. Urbosa saw them and stood. The others followed suit, watching in silence as Link and Zelda walked down the stone pathway until they reached the camp.
Well?
Daruk asked, hopeful.
Don't keep us in suspense. How'd everything go up there on the mountain?
Link could see from the expression on Urbosa and Mipha's faces that they had already guessed what Zelda's answer would be. Zelda didn't meet any of their eyes, but simply continued to look down. She shook her head, releasing a soft sound that might have been a no. Daruk's face fell, his shoulders slumped. Revali frowned and stepped closer, speaking in a surprisingly tender tone that Link wouldn't have expected from him. So, you didn't feel anything? No power at all? I'm sorry, no, Zelda said. For a moment there was silence, and then Urbosa stepped forward, reaching a hand out and squeezing Zelda's shoulder firmly. Then let's move on. She lowered her face so that she could look the smaller woman in the eyes. You've done all you could. Feeling sorry for yourself now won't be of any help. Zelda met her eyes but said nothing. Urbosa must have seen something of the hurt she felt, though, for her expression softened further. Oh, little bird. This isn't the end. Your last shot wasn't up there on Mount Lanayru. Anything could spark the power within you. We just have to keep looking for that thing. Link watched Zelda, pain tearing at her heart. His words on the rise, his insistence to put up that barrier between them, already seemed so callous. Another mistake, another regret. Could he not find a way to help her, rather than hurt her? That's kind of you, she said, her voice soft. Thank you. If I may, Mipha stepped closer to Zelda, gazing up at her. She didn't continue until Zelda finally met her eyes. I'm not sure how to put this into words. She stepped closer, again, eyes darting from Zelda to Link and back. It's actually quite embarrassing to say it, but I was thinking about what I do when I'm healing. You know, what usually goes through my mind as I do it. Mipha looked even more nervous now, bringing her hands together between her breasts, fingers interlocking. It helps when I think about... The ground began to rumble beneath their feet. It shook violently and each of them stumbled, throwing arms and wings out to maintain balance. Link reached out, grabbing onto Zelda's arm to steady her and throw her behind him if necessary. His eyes darted about, looking for a threat. And then he saw it. A cloud on the horizon. A growing, pulsing mass of red and black that spiraled up from the ground. It was miles and miles away, and the mountains prevented him from seeing where it originated from. But he knew what lay in that direction. The others saw it, and Revali suddenly crouched low, spreading his wings. There was a burst of an updraft and he was airborne, flying in a tight circle. Link kept a tight hold on Zelda, watching Revali as he became a speck in the sky. Dread filled his heart as he watched that cloud full of darkness and red lightning billow up into the sky. Zelda trembled. The others waited in silence, tense. The ground beneath them continued to rumble. Revali swooped back down, landing on the ground. He looked terrified. It's here. No. No, not this, not now. Are you sure? Mipha asked, voice quavering. Positive. Zelda's legs nearly gave out, but Link caught her, holding her upright. She shook violently now, hand to her mouth. Her skin had gone white. "Ganon," she whispered. The world spun around him, but he anchored himself by holding Zelda as tightly as he could. The words from just minutes ago were forgotten. Now all that mattered was her. He had to keep her safe. Daruk turned, his expression hardening. "Let's stop wasting time. We're going to need everything we've got to take that thing down. Champions, we need to get to our divine beasts." The others turned to look at him. Daruk was no longer the affable Goron, who liked to smile and joke. In an instant, he had become the leader of his people, the general who led the Goron army, small though it might have been. "Link will need to meet Ganon head-on when we attack. This needs to be a unified assault. That doesn't give us much time. Little guy, you get to Hyrule Castle." There was something there in his eyes, an understanding that no matter what, Link could never get there in time. None of them could. He only hoped that the Guardian's presence in and around the castle could repel Ganon for a time. Urbosa placed a hand on Link's shoulder, forcing him to look up at her. "But first, you need to get the princess to safety. Perhaps Kakariko village." "No." Zelda's voice came out strong and firm. She pulled away from Link's grip, stepping forward and staring up at the mass in the sky. "I'm not a child anymore. I don't know what use I will be on the battlefield, but I cannot leave now. I will face it with you all." "No," Link said. "No, Zelda, that's suicide. We'll handle this. You..." She whirled on him, cheeks spotted with color. "No, Link. I will be there. This may be the event that sparks my powers. I will not run and hide when I'm needed. Those are my people, and I will be there for them." He began to grow angry. Didn't she see? She needed to be safe. She needed to be protected. How could he protect her if she was engaged in combat with Ganon? He opened his mouth to argue, but Urbosa squeezed his shoulder tightly. "She's right," she said, voice soft. She stared at Zelda. "You're right. You are as much a part of this as we are." She turned her face to look at Link. "Protect her, Link. With your life." He hesitated, staring up into the taller woman's eyes. He'd never actually noticed that her eyes were a very similar shade of green as Zelda's. She really could have been the princess's mother. And Link could tell that these words hurt her, as they would any mother. But he saw hardness there too. Necessity. "I will." "I'll go now," Rivali said, bending down and preparing his gale again. "Rivali," Link said. The Rito looked back at him, frowning. "Be careful." Rivali scoffed. "I'm not the one who's going to be exposed." He paused. "You too." He met the eyes of the other champions and nodded, and then with a rush of wind, he was off into the air again and rapidly traveling west. "Come on," Urbosa said. She reached Zelda and, to the smaller woman's surprise, lifted her off the ground and onto the back of her white stallion, who had already been saddled in preparation for their departure today. Her dress bunched up around her legs, revealing tight-fitting white trousers beneath. "We need to get moving. Daruk, try to keep up. You've got a distance to travel, Mipha. You can ride with one of us until we get to the river." Link approached Epona and climbed into the saddle before reaching a hand down. He pulled Mipha up behind him. Urbosa likewise mounted her own tall stallion. "Let's ride." "Princess!" Impo's voice cut through the late evening darkness as Link and Zelda finally rode into Kakariko village. Their horses were spent, pushed far past the point that any horse should have to endure in their journey from the mountain to the village. They'd been afforded very little rest and had been forced to keep running or at least trotting for hours. It was amazing that neither of them died. There was a possibility that one or both of them still could. And it had been for what? To save a day. They still had days yet to reach the castle. Would there be anything left? He thought of his father and his sister, and prayed to the heavens that they'd been able to get out. Let the Guardians hold it back, delay its attack just for a few more days. Impa ran up to Zelda, her white hair disheveled. Link saw both Purah and Robbie there. They'd all said that they would meet in Kakariko village on the way back from Mount Lanayru. Fortunate for them to have been away from the castle at the time of the attack. Zelda wavered in her saddle and moved to dismount, but she slipped and Impa just managed to catch her as she fell from the horse. Zelda was barely conscious. He thought that she'd been able to get some sleep in the saddle. Should he have stopped them? He'd been so desperate to get back. He quickly dismounted off Epona, and his own knees nearly gave out as he did so. He was just as exhausted as she. He hurried around Epona to kneel on the ground next to Zelda, where Impa had set her down, looking into the princess's eyes with concern. "I'm sorry," Zelda said, her voice faint. "We've ridden far, and we have a great deal left to go. Perhaps something to eat and drink, and we can—" Impa cut her off. "Princess, you can't leave in the state you're in. What about the other champions? Have they gone to the Divine Beasts? Barbossa passed here just hours ago and took a fresh horse to continue on." "They've all gone. I expect they've all reached the Divine Beasts now, with the exception of Barbossa. It will take us several days to get there." "She said she could make it in 3, Link said, glancing at Impa, "but I'm sure she'll push it even faster than that." Impa looked worried. "And it will take her another 2 at least to bring her Divine Beast into position." Zelda shook her head. "I doubt it will even take that long. It won't have to stop to rest. She'll be back within a day, I'm sure of it. Likely even less, maybe half a day. She always keeps Naboris near the entrance of the desert where she leaves." "So, 3 days from now. The earliest she will arrive will be in 3 days. The other Divine Beasts will already be on their way, and likely there soon, if they haven't already." Zelda nodded slowly. "Impa, what have you heard?" Impa hesitated, glancing back towards Purah. The other Sheikah woman looked as worried as Impa did, and crossed her arms, hugging herself. Finally, Purah approached, kneeling in front of Zelda. "It's not looking good, Zelda," she said. Link noted the use of Zelda's name. Purah usually only did that when they were in private. "We haven't been able to get any information from the area. The scouts that have been sent have gone missing," Impa said, frowning. Zelda bit her lip, glancing from Impa to Purah. "And the Guardians? Had they been activated? Do we know if they are attacking Ganon?" Link shuddered at the name. Ganon. It had truly returned, and they weren't ready. Purah shook her head. "We don't know. We just don't know." Zelda closed her eyes, shaking slightly in Impa's arms. "Then we shall leave after a short rest." "What?" Impa asked, eyes widening. "Princess, no. It will be days before all the Divine Beasts are set in place. We need to give Barbossa time to arrive. I need to check on my kingdom, my people. I need to make sure they're safe. And your power. Has your power awakened?" Zelda hesitated, and then she looked down. "No." Impa closed her eyes and remained like that for a long time. Finally, she opened them again. "Princess, it would be best if you stayed with us. In fact, we should take you somewhere else, that you can be safe." "No," Zelda said more forcefully now. "I will not run and abandon my people. I will go and give them hope, while we wait for the other Divine Beasts to arrive. I'm sure they are terrified now." The words were hollow, and Link knew it. Neither of them had spoken the fear out loud, but he knew they both felt it. What if the Guardians hadn't been able to oppose Ganon? What if there was nothing left of Castletown? "Zelda," he said, finally, kneeling beside her. "I'll go. I'll check on the state of things, and then return here immediately. Then we can both go and join the Divine Beasts." He didn't know if he would truly return, if he could keep her here, out of harm's way. "No." She shook her head again. "No, Link. We will go together." Impa gently helped Zelda back to her feet. "There's no use speaking about this now. You both need rest. We can discuss our future plans in the morning. Zelda looked ready to object, but then she gave in to Impa's prodding, leaning on the Sheikah woman as she led them to a nearby house. Her own family's house, Link knew, though she primarily lived at the castle. After some hesitation, Link followed. He couldn't ride off alone now. He didn't know how much longer he could remain awake either. The sound of a sliding door woke him. Groaning softly, he looked around, trying to judge what time it was. The room was still dark, and no light bled through the closed window shutter. For a moment, he thought about going back to sleep. He was so tired. But then a thought occurred to him. He cursed and threw the blankets off of himself, hurrying across the room to the bed Zelda had slept in. Empty. Swearing, he grabbed his tunic off the bed and slipped it on. As he crossed the room to the door, he slid it open and peered out. And there, quickly crossing the courtyard to the village stable, was Zelda in her white dress. Running, he thought, grimacing. He took off after her, not wearing any boots. Zelda! She froze and looked back at him. The stars overhead provided limited illumination, but even with how dim it was, he could tell that she'd been crying. Her eyes were puffy, and hair disheveled. You can't just leave, he said, reaching her. You heard what Impa said. It will be days yet before Urbosa arrives. I can't just wait here, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I have to see what I can do to help. Perhaps the Guardians. If the Sheikah and assistants controlling them, I could... Zelda. He could understand her pain. He wanted to leave so desperately himself. His family had been there. He needed to know if they were safe. He prayed they would be safe. Let me get my boots. We'll go together. It's just a look. We won't attempt to engage Ganon until after the others arrive. Zelda bit her lip, but finally nodded. Good. Go try to get some horses ready. Pick out some sturdy ones. We've got an even longer ride ahead of us this time. Maybe we'll get lucky and pass some refugees on the road, and we'll trade horses. She nodded again, and Link turned back to Impa's home. It had been emptied of everyone besides the two of them. He appreciated that Impa didn't even hesitate to offer Link the other bed in the room. He would have insisted if she hadn't. He hurried back towards the dark home to put on boots and grab the Master Sword. They passed no refugees on the road from Kakariko village, and eventually reached the river crossing that would take them into Hyrule Field. Link, look, Zelda said, pointing towards the castle. Ganon's red haze swirled around it, dark and foreboding, and the storm circled above it, still shooting out bolts of red lightning. Do you see them? He didn't know what she meant at first, but understood a moment later. 5 enormous columns, each the size of one of the castle towers, jutted out of the ground and angled towards the castle. Do you know what this means? Zelda asked, looking back at him with wide eyes. It means Guardians. Those are the columns that stored the bogle of the Guardians. I'm sure of it. They must have activated when they sensed Ganon's presence. With any luck, the Guardians themselves will have activated as well. Perhaps they are keeping it at bay. He saw hope in her eyes, and felt a burgeoning sense of optimism as well. If Ganon had been contained, he feared for those at the castle, of course, but if the town had been kept safe. The hope died shortly thereafter, when they passed through the Mabe Prairie and began to see the burned remnants of farmhouses. No, what happened? Zelda asked, staring with wide eyes at a house that had been reduced to its foundations. It looked as though it had been blown apart. Link said nothing, staring at the home. They were still miles away from Castletown, but this appeared to confirm their fears. He closed his eyes again, praying that his father and sister had made it out. But they still hadn't encountered any survivors. It was possible that many had gone to Orsed and Karok Bridges, but none of them traveled towards Rebane. The damage must have been caused before before the Guardians responded to it, Zelda said. But that did nothing to help either of them. If Ganon had destroyed this little farm, then what had it done to Castletown? He gripped his reins and shook his head. Zelda, we should wait here. What? She looked back at him, eyes wide. No, we need to keep going. We could reach Castletown by morning if we... Our horses can't make it that far. You know that. They're exhausted already. She bit her lip, looking down at the brown gelding she had selected for herself. Link could see the sheen of sweat on its neck. His own speckled horse wasn't any better, even a little worse off. Its sides heaved with exhaustion, and foam dripped from its mouth. Neither horse had been built for this kind of distance riding. Epona or Storm could have likely made it in one extended trip, but it would have pushed them to their limits, and they had already been spent the day before. We could walk, she whispered. We've ridden all day. If we started walking now... Link shook his head, though his heart sank even further as he did so. Please let them be all right. We need to rest. We can rest until morning and continue on. It will be for the best anyway. We still haven't seen any of the divine beasts. I thought that we would have at least seen Meadow flying around by now. It's a long trip. Perhaps Revali had to rest, or maybe he went to help some people from Castletown. I'm sure he'll be here soon. No. He wouldn't have stopped to help. He knows how important it is to get the divine beast into position. And besides, we should have seen Mipha by now as well. It all didn't add up. Something felt very wrong. Maybe you're right. Link dismounted from his horse and walked to Zelda's. But we need to rest. Come on, we can sleep in that grove over there. They led their horses onto the grove of trees, and Link removed the horses' saddles. Once they and Zelda were situated, he went back out to the old farmhouse. Gratefully, he found a well that still stood, and even still had a bucket attached to the pulley. He began to search the destroyed house itself. And that was when he found the bodies. 3 of them, burned corpses, barely recognizable. One was small, only a child. They were huddled in a corner, partially buried under the wreckage of the house. He remained there for a long time, trying not to imagine that the dead child was Arl, but failing. Finally, he went back to the grove of trees with 2 buckets of water and gave some to each of the horses. He returned to the farmhouse once more to grab another bucket for him and Zelda to share. He didn't tell her about the bodies. Light streaming in through the canopy finally woke Link that next morning. He was sitting up with his back to a tree, surprised that he'd even been able to sleep like that. He'd been unable to lay down, as Zelda had fallen asleep, leaning back against him, her cheek resting against his. His arms were still around her torso, their hands interlocked. The night had been chilly, and Link hadn't dared start a fire. They used the saddle blankets to cover their legs, and relied on Body Heap to keep them warm. She was still in her dress. Why hadn't she changed out of it back in the village? It was too late now, though. Neither of them had brought any extra provisions. No clothes, no bedrolls. Link had the Master Sword and a shield. Zelda didn't even have that. What were they even doing? The cry of a distant bird of prey, but far louder and mechanical sounding, finally woke Zelda. She jerked her head up, looking around in confusion. She looked back at Link, eyes widening in alarm. But then, understanding set in. "That's Meadow," she said, voice hoarse. She jumped to her feet, and Link rose after her, wincing at the soreness he felt in his back. She slipped her feet into their sandals, and hurried towards the edge of the trees. Link followed quickly, uncertain about what threats remained in the area. When they emerged, however, nothing attacked them. There was Castle Hyrule, still miles away, only visible because of its greater elevation. But flying much closer was the divine beast Meadow. It flew in a spot between them and the castle, circling high in the air. Link frowned. What was Revali doing? If Revali has arrived, then perhaps the other 2 have as well. She looked at Link. We need to get going. I'm certain that Ganon will try to retaliate when he sees the divine beasts arriving. Perhaps Perhaps with just 3 we can still defeat it. She didn't mention it, nor did he. But both of them knew there was a fatal flaw in that plan. They had no actual way of defeating Ganon, to the best of their knowledge. Could the Master Sword even deal a death blow? The lore suggested Zelda's powers were central, and from the creature that Revali described, he didn't know how he was supposed to fight such Ganon at all, much less kill it. They saddled their horses and quickly rode for Hyrule Castle. As they crossed the last leg of the trip, other signs of battle appeared to them. Other farmsteads destroyed, lines of scorched earth on the ground, an entire village razed, and more than one burned corpse. With each one they passed, Zelda grew more and more disturbed. Her skin was white, and it was amazing that she hadn't gotten sick. She was far, far tougher than any princess had any right to be. But he worried for her, and he would only continue to worry. For worrying about her was the only thing that kept him from dissolving into panic himself. What could have caused this? Zelda asked, voice barely above a whisper, as she looked at a stone silo that had been obliterated, burned grain spread out on the ground all around it. Even if Ganon's monsters attacked, they could never have caused this kind of destruction, not this quickly. Could they have attacked while they were traveling to the mountain? I don't know, Link said, staring at the destroyed silo. But he had begun to notice more and more disturbing signs. The lines of scorched earth, he'd seen those before. And there were what appeared to be 3-toed footprints in places too. He was growing increasingly certain that guardians had been here. But why? Were they chasing Ganon? Was it possible that Ganon didn't even remain in the castle anymore? The red storm still circled above it, but they'd seen no sign of the creature. They continued on, and passed under Meadow's slow circling form. It screeched again and continued to circle overhead, following them back towards the castle. Perhaps Revali had been looking for them. Finally, as their horses neared the point of exhaustion again, Ruda's tall form came into view. Rodania stood right next to her, its tail resting on the ground. And beyond the divine beasts lay the ruins of Castletown. No, this can't be. What happened? Zelda asked, staring around at the destroyed city around them. Many buildings were blackened and collapsed. He saw bodies. They huddled against walls, or lay in doorways. Hylians and Chica were sometimes only distinguishable from each other by the scraps of clothing that remained. But there were Zora, Gorons, Gerudo, and Rito too. There was death everywhere. Link stood numb. He could barely think about, barely comprehend what he was seeing. Death and destruction on a scale that he had never known before. Castletown housed over 100,000 residents, a mix from all the races. Had anyone escaped? And this was what the Calamity Ganon did within days of rising? How was anyone supposed to oppose this monster? He stumbled forward, walking past Zelda. He already knew what he would find deeper in the city. But he had to know. He had to see. Link? He didn't stop walking, his boots scuffing the ash-strewn ground. There was a cart in the road in front of him. It had been turned over on its side and burned. The horse that pulled it remained attached, dead, though it was not as burned and desiccated as many of the corpses were. He heard rapid footsteps behind him, and didn't turn to look as Zelda caught up and grabbed his hand. Link, maybe we shouldn't do this. The Bosa hasn't arrived yet. We should regroup with the others. We'll be safe on one of the divine beasts until the last one arrives. He hesitated and nodded. Good idea, he said hollowly. You go. And he gently but firmly pulled his hand free and continued walking. Zelda made a pained sound behind him and hurried to catch up again. She didn't stop him this time, however, but grabbed his hand within her own and held onto it tightly as they made their way deeper into Castletown. The destruction didn't get any better as they went further in. It didn't take them long to come to the city square, where the fountain still stood, though much of the stonework and statues had been broken and lay on the ground. Here they began to see a new substance, a thick tarry substance colored and mottled red and black, that coated parts of the ground in the fountain. It spread out like creeping vines and grew more concentrated the closer they got to the castle. The castle. Neither of them had spoken of it, but it stood like a broken bone jutting out from a body. It had suffered its own destruction in Ganon's rise. Towers lay crumbled on the ground, and stone walls had exploded, both inward and out, as if a great creature had thrashed about mindlessly. They both knew that no one survived that assault. Zelda was, in all likelihood, queen of Hyrule now. Or she would be, assuming there was a Hyrule left when all of this was through. Her father, along with most of the force of knights, squires, servants, and other inhabitants of the castle, were all gone. Those that escaped the initial destruction surely would have fallen victim to it in the city. He tried to care about that, yet he could not summon the emotions to be bothered by the death of his monarch, or the others that he had grown up around. He led her deeper, saying nothing. He should have taken her away from this place, but now that he was here, he couldn't leave. He had to see it with his own eyes. And so they made their way down another familiar street, one that both of them had traveled several times in their short time together. They'd taken a slightly roundabout way of getting here. The horror of seeing the large-scale destruction kept Link from thinking about where his legs took him. Perhaps they'd even be drawing him towards the castle, towards his destiny. But now they were on the right path, and it wasn't long until he found what he came here for. His family's home. It had been obliterated. Link slowly sank down to his knees as he stared at the broken form of the house, where his father and sister both lived in peace. The roof had collapsed in one corner, while the opposite wall had been blown completely free. Bricks spread out in the street beside it. Fires had raged here, burning away the wooden support beams and the roof tiles. He could see the ashy remnants of furniture through the shattered wall. "Oh, Link." Zelda knelt next to him and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm so sorry." He saw no bodies, but that didn't matter. He'd seen enough faces around the town to know that no one had gotten the opportunity to escape. They'd passed no refugees. The destruction had been quick and brutal. His father and sister were likely buried in there, under the broken roof, or perhaps they'd run and ended up as two of the corpses that they'd passed in the streets. He closed his eyes and shook violently. He reached up with trembling hands to his head and gripped his hair, releasing a pent-up scream of horror that echoed off the broken stone walls that surrounded them. Zelda sobbed and clutched him even tighter, burying her face in his shoulder. But suddenly, he didn't want her to touch him. He ripped away from her, sending her spilling to the cobblestones. He rose quickly, still holding his head, and fighting the urge to scream again. He could see broken debris strewn about in his house. The table that Link had served suppers at had collapsed. A portrait of their family had burned up, and the blackened remains of its frame lay on the ground. A wooden model ship. A model ship lay shattered and burned. Link stiffened, staring at it. Arl had loved that gift, and he promised her that he would make sure to spend her next birthday with her. He hadn't known. How could he have known? He'd missed her last birthday. His last opportunity to celebrate her life. All because of Zelda's pilgrimage. Her useless pilgrimage. He whirled on her, shaking. "I should have been here. Link. I could have done something. I should have been here to protect them. There's nothing. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me there's nothing I could have done. I'm the hero, aren't I? The champion. I carry the legendary blade. Don't tell me there's nothing I could have done. I should have been here, instead of running around visiting those damn springs." Zelda's face crumpled, but he didn't care. The anguish and rage he felt was too great to be contained. And for what? You're no closer now than you were before, and now everything is gone. My sister! He choked on the word and lowered his head. I'm sorry, Zelda whispered. I'm so sorry, Link. My sister she's... He turned to look into the broken house, eyes searching the wreckage. And he froze. There in the collapsed portion of the roof was a three-toed footprint, just like out in the field, just like he'd seen elsewhere. It had clearly gripped the roof tiles, its claws digging in deeply. It had climbed onto the house, perhaps even been the cause of the roof's collapse. And the blown-out wall. It had been blown out from the inside. The Guardians, he whispered, eyes widening. The Guardians did this. What? Suddenly, it all made perfect sense to him. This hadn't been Ganon. None of this had been Ganon. No. It had been their guardians, their protectors. That's why no one had been able to escape. The Sheikah had begun parading the guardians through the city. They patrolled around its outskirts. They made the people feel safe, especially considering the recent uptick in monster encounters in and around Hyrule Field. We have to go, Link said. We have to go now. What are you? He wrenched her up by the arm. She yelped in surprise and pain, but he didn't pay attention to that now. He began to pull her towards the main street, where they'd come from. They would go to the Divine Beasts, like she had suggested. Link, what is going on? Where are the Guardians? What? Where are the Guardians, Zelda? You said there were more stored in those columns, didn't you? So where are they? Shouldn't this place be swarming with them? I don't... She frowned, looking back at the massive columns which glowed red with the Sheikah constellation patterns. Maybe they didn't activate properly. No, they activated. He pulled her into the fountain square and onto the thoroughfare that led out to the city. He could see all three Divine Beasts now. Both Ruda and Redania stood just where they had been when he and Zelda arrived, and Meadow circled overhead. Why were they just standing there? Why hadn't any of the champions come out? It took a moment for Zelda to realize his concerns. No, this wouldn't have been caused by them. They were created to fight Ganon. Something was off about the Divine Beasts, but it took him a moment to place it. Hadn't their lights once been blue? Why'd they turned red? Were they responding to Ganon's presence? All the more reason to get out of here as quickly as possible. Come on. We can worry about that later. Right now, let's get to Ruda. Mipha would house them. Of the four, Ruda was the most protected above the Divine Beasts, and had some of the most effective defensive measures, though he wasn't sure how good it would be away from water. But she could reposition near the river, or even the Sacred Grounds pond. His heart wrenched at the thought of leaving behind his family, his home. But he still had a duty to accomplish. He needed to protect Zelda. He could still protect her. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and Link cursed. They broke into a run, tearing down the street, around the broken horse cart, and over the burned corpses of people they may have once known. They approached the exit of the city quickly. And what were those on the ground? Link stumbled to a stop and Zelda bumped into him with a soft grunt. Link, what? She saw them. 3 bodies arranged on the ground directly in their path. A Zora, a Goron, and a Rito. Mipha, Daruk, Revali. She screamed. Mipha lay on the ground, her eyes open and unseen. Daruk, his body broken and torn. Revali, his neck, at an odd angle. They all bore the wounds of battle, cuts, gashes, and burns. And they were all very, very dead. No. Mipha dead. His oldest friend and one of the best people he ever knew. They'd spent so many summers with each other. She taught him how to swim. and he taught her about cooking, even though she was never good at it. Daruk, his brother. He could remember the countless hours they'd spent laughing together, complaining about each other's food choices or just relaxing in the hot springs. Even Rivali. They had never been friends, but Link respected him as a warrior, and someone as dedicated to protecting Hyrule as he was. "We have to run," he whispered, staring at the bodies with wide eyes. One of the nearby buildings shook. The rubble trembled, small pieces falling and clattering on the stone. And then suddenly, something rose up from within it. 6 legs, red lights forming a constellation pattern all over its body. A single, pulsing blue eye. Guardian. Link shoved Zelda to the side as it fired, the beam passing just between them and smashing into a house behind. She cried out in alarm, and he reached to his back, placing the shield on his arm. When it fired again, he deflected the beam right back towards it, catching it directly in the eye. The Guardian began to tremble as its systems overloaded. "Come on!" Link helped Zelda to her feet and held her hand in his right as he drew the Master Sword in his left. The sword shone with a bright white light. Zelda gasped when she saw it, but he could spare no time thinking about it now. Guardians began to appear in front of them. They climbed out of the rubble of homes and buildings, their spidery legs tearing at the brick and mortar with ease. No, this isn't, it's not. Link pulled Zelda down a side street, and he heard the pursuit behind them. He spared a glance back and then flattened Zelda against a wall, as another of the Guardians fired at them, his blast leaving a line of scorched cobblestones right where they had been running. "Come on!" He pushed her into a ruined house and out through a broken wall into another alley. They ran, and the Guardians pursued. They burst out onto a street, and suddenly a Guardian raced to block them, its eyes pulsing angrily. Link shoved Zelda to the side and ducked as it fired over his head. He ran forward and swept his sword up at its leg. The Master Sword cut through with almost no resistance, and the Guardian shook, its lights flashing madly. He cut through 2 more of its legs before it toppled, and he bounded up onto it, ramming his sword into its eye. "Link!" He whirled and saw Zelda point as one of the flying Guardians hovered into view. He barely reached her in time to get his shield up and protect her from the blast. It hit his shield hard, and the beam bounced off, tearing into another building with its destructive power. He pulled her back to his feet and ducked down another narrow alley. The alley's exit showed a blue light, so he pushed her down another side passage, just as it fired towards them. The ground trembled again, and Link heard a terrible roar from the direction of the castle. When they came out onto another street, he glanced back, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The beast, Ganon, had risen from the haze that swirled around the castle. It was without solid form. He could see a pig's snout and tusks, and 2 shining yellow eyes, but the rest of its body was nothing but trailing smoke. This was a trap. It lured us here, drew us in, and waited until we were surrounded. Cursing himself for a fool, Link pulled Zelda down behind a broken wall as another Guardian beam lanced out and struck it. The wall shook and pieces of it blew free, pelting them with debris. He left her there for a moment and vaulted over the wall, his shield out. When it fired again, he was prepared, and he sent the blast back in its direction. Something hit him, tearing through his tunic and leaving a gash on his side. The blow threw him to the side. He grunted and rolled across the ground, coming to a stop 5 feet away. A Guardian, one of its 6 feet now red with his blood, stood over him. "Link!" Zelda cried. The Guardian paused, apparently not having noticed her. It turned its head in confusion towards her huddled form, and Link attacked, removing 2 of its legs with 2 quick strikes. When it toppled, it rolled onto its side, and he struck the glowing blue point at the center of its base. He leaped back behind the wall and pulled Zelda down into him as it exploded. A moment later, they were running again. He dragged her towards another of the city gates, but a swarm of Guardians moved to block them. A beam flew past, burning his shoulder and making him cry out in sudden, fiery pain. Zelda yanked him to the side, down another alley, before any of the other Guardians could fire on them. He hissed in pain, but soon took the lead again. They were slowly rounding the city now, being herded back in the direction of the castle, back towards Calamity Ganon. Could he fight that thing? Could he somehow defeat it? No. The champions were dead. The divine beasts were useless. Zelda didn't have her sealing power, and Link had no idea how he could fight a thing made of shifting mists. Even if he could, Ganon didn't need to fight him. Its guardians were plenty. One of the smaller guardian scouts entered the alley and fired. Link grabbed Zelda and whirled, shielding her with his body. The blast struck him high on his back, and he grunted, clenching his teeth to keep from crying out. And then he spun away from her and rammed the Master Sword into its eye. "Come on," he hissed, and pulled her across another street. Guardians swarmed on both sides of them now. There were dozens of them. He could see several of the flyers overhead, as well as many of the walking variety. Could he somehow fight his way through them? Not with Zelda in tow. He couldn't both protect her and go on the offensive. So they ran. They ducked through broken buildings and down cramped alleyways. They ran through debris and refuse. They stumbled over the bodies of Hylians, Sheikahs, Goron, Zora, Gerudo, Rito. Men, women, and children. All dead before they'd even had a chance to escape. Link fought guardians one after another, each time just enough to clear the way to another alley, another street, another building. The guardians were not hard to fool, but there were so many of them that they didn't need to be smart. They didn't need to guess where he was going. There were so many of them that they were often waiting for him when he emerged anyway. Through it all, he protected the princess. He destroyed the mechanical beasts. He blocked their blasts, and he shielded her with his body more than once. By the time they finally reached their destination, he ached from a dozen different burns and cuts. Her white dress was stained with his blood. Ganon roared its fury, swirling around the castle in an angry cloud. Why didn't it attack itself? Surely the great calamity was more powerful and deadly than these machines, yet it remained back. The guardians pursued, however, racing over the buildings that still stood, or flying through the air. They left the streets behind and emerged into an open area near one of the enormous columns. The remains of the old cathedral, a structure that had stood according to the priests for over 1,000 years, lay before them, broken and reduced to rubble. Another guardian's beam burned a fireland between them, but Link kept running, leading Zelda into the ruins of the cathedral, and out the other side. This was a place he knew, because Arl had brought him here on multiple occasions. As they emerged out the other side of the cathedral, he saw it, a section of the wall that had cracked with age. It formed a narrow passage that led out to the banks of the river, and hopefully their freedom. "Go," he said, shoving Zelda towards the crack. "I'll hold them back." "No, I'm not leaving you. I'll be right behind you. But we both can't fit in there at once. Now go, before it's too late." She went, getting onto her hands and knees in the muck and crawling through the narrow passage. He watched her to make sure she was progressing, and then he turned as two guardians raced across the ground towards him, and one of the flyers approached. They fired, and Link focused his senses. Things appeared to slow down around him, and he spun into motion, dodging the first beam and knocking the second one back. He swung the Master Sword towards the flying guardian, and an arc of light shot out from its edge. Time sped back up around him, and two guardians collapsed, their lights flickering rapidly. The first of the three fired again, and Link deftly knocked this blast back toward it. He didn't understand this power, nor the Master Sword's apparent destructive capabilities against these machines, but he didn't care. For now, it kept them alive. Zelda could speculate about what it all meant another time. He sheathed his sword and dove back towards the crack, desperately crawling into it. He heard and felt more guardian blasts strike against the wall above him, and pieces of stone and dust rained down on him. What if the whole wall collapsed on him? Grimacing, he crawled faster. Zelda had already emerged out the other side. Finally, he did so as well, standing up and looking around to see her, with her back pressed against the wall, staring at him with wide eyes. The river stretched before them, the current swirling with eddies, where the river met with the castle's moat and split off. It was at the bottom of a steep cliff, but there was a narrow patch of dirt and grass between the wall and cliff's edge. He grabbed her hand and began to drag her along the wall to the right. The Boneyard Bridge lay that way. Perhaps they could reach it and make for the north, towards Akala. The Citadel, perhaps, could provide them with enough protection to plan. Plan for what? A counterattack? It would have been a laughable suggestion if things weren't so dire. One of the flyers passed overhead and fired down at them. Link cursed, turning and holding his shield up. The beam of energy bounced off, hitting the river with a hiss of steam. He saw other guardians as well, climbing over the wall in pursuit, and suddenly, the spot where they'd escaped exploded outwards as a guardian charged through the wall, turning its blue eye on them. "Jump!" Link cried. He grabbed Zelda's hand and yanked her off the cliff. They fell the short distance down into the cold water of the river below. As they landed, he lost his grip on her hand and swept about in the murky depths trying to find her again. But the current here was wild and random. Finally, he clawed his way to the surface, kicking at the depths ineffectually with his boots. His shield felt heavy and weighed him down, but he didn't dare release it. He spun around looking for his princess, who didn't emerge with him. "Zelda!" Some rocks fell into the water nearby, and he looked up to see one of the guardians perched on the cliff's edge. Its legs gripping the rock tightly, and its body at a steep angle, so it could bring its head around to fire at him. He took a deep breath and dove back into the water as it fired. He felt the water's temperature around him suddenly grow hot, but then cool again quickly as the river continued to swirl and flow. He stayed under the surface of the water, desperately searching with his hands. Finally, he touched something soft and he grabbed it. The hem of her dress. He pulled it towards him until he eventually felt one of her hands brush his arms. She flailed, panicking as her dress billowed around her, entangling her legs. He found her waist and drew her close before kicking hard for the surface. Their heads burst out of the water and they both took a deep breath. And then he shoved her back under, again, as more guardians fired upon them. He began to swim with the current, hoping that he was traveling in the direction of the river, and not the moat. The guardians continued the fire, but their blasts were ineffectual against the surface of the river, and they seemed to have a difficult time tracking them in the river's depths. He pulled Zelda up again, taking a breath, and looked around. One of the guardians spotted them and fired, but most of the others were still looking at some spot 30 feet back. Before she could say anything, he pushed her head back under the water, and together they kicked their feet, trying to put as much distance between them and the guardians. It wasn't that hard. As they made their way away from the spots where the currents met, the river's pull became stronger. Soon it was all Link could even do to keep their heads above the water, as it pulled them inexorably along. He could see the Boneyard Bridge nearing, but there were steep cliffs on either side of them, and the guardians were still too close behind them. Cursing, Link held on to Zelda as they passed underneath the bridge, and the branch of the river they were in rejoined with the main Hylia River. She clung to his arms tightly, obviously struggling now to keep her head above water. Link could understand. His arms and legs burned with the effort of swimming in the strong current, especially with his sword on his back, and shield still attached to his forearm. If they'd tried swimming against the current, they would have undoubtedly been swept under. He began to look around for a bank they could make for. He tried to swim to the bank opposite Hyrule Field, towards the Crenel Hills, but the current fought against him, continuing to sweep them downriver, with little ability to direct their path. He looked around and realized that Zelda's head had passed under the water. Cursing, he pulled her back up and she gasped, clinging to him even tighter and nearly dragging him back under himself. Water splashed against the back of his head, and only his fervent kicking in the depths below kept them from going under. He finally gave up holding onto his shield and released it. The current quickly pulled it off of his arm. "We need to..." He choked as some water flooded into his mouth. "Swim to the shore!" He pointed to the opposite bank, and they began to swim together. But it was still no use. The current had them, and there was no fighting it now. So, he kept hold of her, and they both fought to keep their heads over the surface of the water as they were swept downstream. Eventually, they reached a shallower spot on the river, where they were able to fight their way back onto the bank nearest Hyrule Field, near a thick forest. He thought that he might have recognized it as the Aplean Forest. He'd hunted a buck here with his father several years back. He helped Zelda out of the water, and the two of them collapsed in the mud, coughing and heaving. His muscles burned from the effort of keeping both of them above the surface. It was amazing that they hadn't drowned. He'd never been the strongest swimmer, but it was clear that Zelda wasn't either. They remained there for a long time, before finally, Link pushed himself back to his feet with a groan. Fat raindrops had begun to fall from the clouds, making the bank even muddier. His body hurt from the places he'd been hit by the Guardian's fire. His shoulder and back, in particular. He walked to where Zelda lay, curled onto her side, still trembling. "Come on," he said. She didn't move. "Come on, Zelda. We have to keep moving." "We have to go back," she whispered, though she remained still. He knelt down in the mud, reaching out and placing a hesitant hand on her shoulder. "You know we can't. We have to. The other champions may be gone, but Urbosa, she still might. Zelda, I'm sorry, but we can't expect her to survive when the others didn't. It was a trap. It was all a trap." Her expression crumpled, and Link closed his eyes, sighing shakily. What could he even say now? What could he do to comfort her, when his own pain was still so acute? So many dead. "You should go," she finally whispered. "Just leave me. I'll stay here. Wait until Naboris arrives. If she's truly gone, then I... Link frowned and reached down into the muck, and wrapped a hand around her torso. He forced her to sit up, and tenderly brushing some of her wet hair away from her face with his other hand. No. You know why I could never leave you. You should have," she said, bitterness leaking into her tone. "You should have left me months ago. You were right. You should have been here. Maybe you could have made a difference instead of being up there with me. On that mountain." The words cut through him like a knife. No, there's nothing I could have done here. I couldn't have saved them. I couldn't have saved any of them. I barely kept us alive. I was where I needed to be, Zelda. And I'm so sorry for saying those things. I wasn't in my right mind. She looked down, gripping the mud in her fingers. How? How did it come to this? The divine beasts, the guardians? They were supposed to protect us. They were going to save us, and now... It was all a trap, Link whispered. Ganon probably planned this for years. She shuddered at his words. It turned them all against us. And everyone, Mifa, Daru, Gravoli. Even Urbosa, they're all gone. And it's all my fault. She buried her face in her dirty hands, shoulders shaking. No, Zelda, it's... Our only hope for defeating Ganon is lost. All because I couldn't harness this cursed power. Everything I've done up until now, it was all for nothing. She looked up at him, growing hysterical. I really am just a failure. Link reached out, grabbing her hands, shaking his head. No, Zelda, you're not. She wasn't listening to him. All my friends, the entire kingdom, my father, your sister. Oh, Goddess Link, I tried and I failed them all. I let them all die. Her face broke and she released an anguished sob, falling into his arms. He held her tightly, gently stroking her wet hair. He wanted to cry too. He wanted to mourn the loss of his family and friends, of his home, his kingdom, his entire life. But he knew that he could not. His time of mourning would come, in time. But he still had a duty to carry out. There was one more person that he needed to protect. And so, he held Zelda as she wept. He didn't tell her that it would be all right. He couldn't lie to her like that. But he wouldn't leave her. Not as long as he still drew breath.